If you could sit across from Jesus right now and ask him just one thing, what would it be? Would you ask for healing from a sickness that's been plaguing you for years? Would you ask for a breakthrough in your finances or relationships? Would you ask for clear direction about your future? The disciples who walked with Jesus saw his miracles up close. They watched him turn water into wine, calm raging storms with a word, multiply a boy's lunch to feed thousands, and even raise the dead. They heard his teachings that left crowds speechless. They could have asked for anything: power to perform miracles themselves, the secrets to preaching like him, or strategies to build a movement. Yet out of everything they witnessed, they asked for one thing: Lord, increase our faith. Think about that. They didn't say, Lord, teach us how to do miracles. They didn't ask, Lord, show us how to draw crowds. They understood that the power behind everything Jesus did flowed from something deeper, a life of radical, unwavering faith in the Father. They realized that if they could learn to trust like Jesus trusted, they could live like Jesus lived. Now, let's be honest. How many of us say we have faith, but feel like it's not enough when life gets hard? How many times have you faced a problem, and your first response was worry instead of trust? Maybe you believe in God, but when the doctor gives bad news, when the money runs out, or when the relationship falls apart, your faith feels small and shaky. You're not alone. So many believers know that faith is important, but few have ever been truly taught how to walk in the kind of faith Jesus had. And that's exactly why we made this video. In this video, we're not just going to talk about what faith looks like in theory. We're going to dive deep into where Jesus exercised faith, when he chose faith over fear, how he responded in moments of testing, and most importantly, why his faith never failed. Because if Jesus, the Son of God, lived a life of constant dependence and trust in the Father, how much more do we need to? This isn't just about learning Bible stories. This is about transformation. If you've ever wondered why your faith feels weak in the storms of life, if you've ever struggled with doubt and fear, or if you've ever wanted a deeper, unshakable trust in God, this is for you. Today, we learn from the Master himself. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video. It helps spread the message of faith to more people. If you're new here, welcome. We've created in-depth explanation videos on books of the Bible and key teachings of Jesus to help you grow deeper in your walk with God. We've also turned some of our most powerful studies into ebooks. Check the description below to grab yours. And now a question for you. What is your biggest struggle when it comes to faith? Is it doubt when things don't make sense? Is it fear when the future looks uncertain? Is it staying strong when prayers seem unanswered? Drop it in the comments below. We read every single one, and we'd love to stand with you in prayer. With that being said, let's get started. If there's one thing that stands out from Jesus' life, it's that he never lived disconnected from the Father. His miracles, his wisdom, his compassion, it all flowed from his constant trust and obedience. Faith wasn't just something he had. It was who he was. But here's the problem. Many people believe in faith, but they don't actually walk in it. They know it's important, but it's not urgent. They push it aside thinking they'll trust God more when things get better. But later never comes. Then life hits. Health issues, financial pressure, relationship struggles, spiritual battles. and suddenly they're desperate for strong faith, but they don't know how to build it. This is why Jesus lived in constant faith. He wasn't waiting for a crisis to trust the Father. He was always connected, always depending, always believing. Faith was his source of power before the battle ever came. Think about it. Have you ever gone through a day so overwhelming, so exhausting, that by the end of it you realized your faith had been on the sidelines the whole time? Maybe you started your morning with worry instead of worship. Maybe you got caught up in the news, social media, or just trying to survive. And by the time you remembered to trust God, you were already drained and anxious. Sound familiar? But Jesus never let that happen. He didn't wait until he was overwhelmed. He stayed filled with faith before he poured into others. He let the Father strengthen him first. One of the clearest pictures we have is in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus faced the greatest test of his life. But even before that, throughout his ministry, we see him choosing faith again and again. Before feeding the 5,000, he took the loaves and fish, looked up to heaven, and gave thanks, exercising faith that the Father would provide. Before raising Lazarus, he declared out loud, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." He lived as if the answer was already on the way. Luke tells us that Jesus often withdrew to lonely places, not just to pray, but to reinforce his faith and alignment with the Father's will. Do you see the pattern? Jesus never moved without faith. He didn't step into ministry, choose disciples, face opposition, or walk toward the cross without first anchoring himself in trust in the Father. Now let's talk about us. How often do we move without faith? How often do we make decisions, send that text, post that update, or enter that conversation without first trusting God for wisdom and outcome? How often do we complain, "God, why do I feel so far from you," while we've spent the day operating in our own strength? If we're honest, most of us are spiritually running on empty when it comes to faith. We're trying to handle life without the fuel of trust in God. And just like a car running out of gas, we break down. We get overwhelmed. We lose direction. We feel weak and defeated. But Jesus never ran out of faith. Why? Because he stayed connected. He stayed in constant communion and dependence. This is where everything changes. Faith isn't about checking a religious box or having positive thoughts. It's about staying anchored to your source. Imagine your phone again. It's useless when the battery dies, no matter how advanced it is. We are designed to live by faith in God. When we unplug from trust, we lose power, we lose peace, we lose clarity. Jesus never lost that connection. That's why he could face the cross and still say, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." He never doubted. He never panicked. He never lost focus because his faith was constant. So, here's the question. Are you connected or are you running on empty when it comes to faith? If Jesus, the Son of God, needed to live in constant trust, how much more do we? If he made time to align with the Father, what excuse do we have? Let this be your wake-up call. Make faith non-negotiable. Not just when you need a miracle. Not just when you feel like it. Every day. Before anything else. Because the same unshakable trust, the same peace, the same power that Jesus had is available to you. But you have to stay plugged in. If there's one thing we've learned from Jesus so far, it's this. Faith wasn't just something he had. It was who he was. He didn't just trust when it was convenient or when things were easy. He lived in faith. And if the Son of God needed that deep, constant trust in the Father, how much more do we? But here's the question. What did Jesus actually put his faith in? Because it's one thing to know that he lived in constant faith. It's another thing to look at what he trusted the Father for. And more importantly, what does that teach us about how we should walk in faith? One of the most powerful things about Jesus' faith is that it wasn't just about him. It was about us. Think about that for a second. Jesus, the King of Kings, the one who could command angels and hold the universe together, exercised for you. In the hours before his arrest, right before he would carry the weight of the world's sin, Jesus looked ahead and trusted the Father for the people who would believe because of the disciples' message. He exercised faith that you and I would stand strong. He trusted that his sacrifice would be enough to bring us into the family of God. Let that sink in. In his final moments, before the most excruciating suffering, before betrayal, before the nails, Jesus wasn't focused only on his own pain. He was exercising radical faith for you and me. And that makes his faith so powerful, because it wasn't selfish. It was selfless. If we're honest, that's where most of us struggle when it comes to faith. How much of our faith is centered on us, our needs, our problems, our desires? There's nothing wrong with bringing our needs to God. Jesus did that too. But look at the pattern of his faith. He trusted the Father for others, even when his own path was filled with pain. He trusted God's plan, even when it was hard. He exercised faith not just for himself, but for everyone who would follow him. And that brings us to one of the most intense moments of faith in all of Scripture, Gethsemane. This was the night before the cross, the night when Jesus felt the full weight of what was coming, the night when he fell to the ground in anguish, sweating drops of blood, crying out to the Father, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." "Not my will, but yours be done." Can we just pause right there? Because this is a moment we can't rush past. Jesus, the one who calmed storms, raised the dead, and walked on water, he was in total agony. The weight of the cross, the pain of separation from the Father, it was overwhelming. And yet, even in that moment, he chose faith. He trusted the Father's will over his own comfort. That's the kind of faith that changes everything. And if we're being real, that's the kind of faith that's the hardest to walk in. Surrender is hard. Trusting God when things don't make sense is hard. Saying, "Lord, I don't like this. I don't want this, but I trust you anyway." That's hard. But that's exactly what Jesus showed us. Faith isn't just about getting what we want. It's about aligning ourselves with God's will, even when it hurts. And here's the powerful part. After Jesus exercised that faith, after he surrendered, he stood up and walked straight into his purpose. He didn't run. He didn't fight the plan. He embraced it. Why? Because his faith gave him the strength. And if it did that for Jesus, it can do that for you too. So let's bring this home. How should this change the way you walk in faith? Shift the focus. Jesus exercised for others. Who are you trusting God for right now? Surrender the outcome. Jesus didn't demand his way. He trusted the Father's way. Are you willing to do the same? Find strength in faith. Jesus left Gethsemane stronger than he entered it. Are you allowing faith to strengthen you, or are you only using it as a last resort? The way Jesus walked in faith wasn't just powerful. It was transformational. It didn't just change circumstances. It changed him. And if we truly follow his example, it will change us too. If there's one thing we've learned from Jesus' life of faith so far, it's this. Faith wasn't just a feeling he had. It was the foundation of everything he did. It wasn't an afterthought. It wasn't something he squeezed in when he had time. It was his first response, his highest priority, his direct connection to the Father. And nowhere is that clearer than when Jesus faced a major decision. How do most people make decisions? We analyze. We weigh the pros and cons. We ask friends for advice. We stress about it. And then when all else fails, we throw up a quick "God, please bless this," and hope for the best. But Jesus did the exact opposite. Before making one of the biggest decisions of his ministry, choosing the 12 disciples, Jesus didn't brainstorm. He didn't strategize. He didn't form a committee. He went out to a mountainside and spent the entire night exercising faith in the Father. Luke tells us one of those days Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated apostles. Can we just pause for a second? Because this is huge. Jesus, the Son of God, the Word made flesh, the one who already knew people's hearts, still took an entire night to exercise faith before making that decision. Why? Because even though he was fully God, he was also fully man. And he showed us by example how a real man or woman of God makes decisions, not by rushing, not by guessing, but by seeking the Father's will, first through faith. Now let's be real. Most of us don't spend an entire night exercising faith before making a decision. Some of us barely spend 5 minutes, and yet we wonder why we keep making choices that lead to regret. Think about it. How many times have you made a decision without first anchoring it in faith, and then regretted it later? That job you took because it looked good on paper, but ended up draining your soul. That relationship you jumped into without trusting God for wisdom, and now you're stuck in confusion. That move, that investment, that commitment, all the things you thought would be great, but later realized you never actually exercised faith about it first. That's the mistake so many people make today. We move first, we trust God later. But Jesus shows us that faith isn't just about getting God's blessing on our plans. It's about aligning our heart with his plan. Because let's be honest, what if Jesus had chosen the disciples based on what made sense to human logic? If he had gone by the world's standards, he would have picked the most educated, the most powerful, the most religious. He would have chosen Pharisees, high priests, scholars. Instead, after spending the whole night in faith, he chose fishermen, a tax collector, a zealot, a group of nobodies. Why? Because God's way is higher than ours. His wisdom is deeper than ours. And what seems foolish to the world is often exactly what he wants to use. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. That's why Jesus exercised faith, to make sure he wasn't making decisions based on human reasoning, but on divine direction. And if Jesus, the Son of God, refused to make big decisions without first anchoring them in faith in the Father, how much more do we need to do the same? But here's where it gets real. How often do we treat faith like a backup plan instead of our first move? We date first. We ask God later. We sign the contract first. We trust God after. We move to a new city first. We hope it works out. And then when things go wrong, we cry out, God, why didn't you stop me? But the truth is, He never told us to go in the first place. We just never asked in faith. That's why Jesus' example is so powerful. He didn't just exercise faith when he was in trouble. He exercised faith before he made a move. And that's what we need to start doing. So let me ask you, what's the big decision in your life right now? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a career move. Maybe it's a major transition. Have you exercised real faith about it? Not just a quick God, let this work out, but a deep, surrendered Father, show me your will, even if it's not what I want. Because here's the truth. If you don't have time to exercise faith about it, you don't have time to do it. Jesus spent an entire night in faith before choosing the disciples. An entire night. And we struggle to spend 5 minutes before making life-altering choices. Maybe that's why we keep making decisions that lead to regret. But here's the good news. You don't have to keep doing it that way. From this moment forward, let faith be your first response, not your last resort. Because when you do, you'll stop chasing things that aren't from God. You'll stop walking into situations that drain you. You'll stop wasting time on paths that were never part of His plan. And instead you'll start moving with divine clarity, with purpose, with peace. Because you won't just be following your own desires. You'll be following His voice. If there's one thing we've learned from Jesus' life of faith so far, it's this. Faith wasn't just a feeling He had. It was the foundation of everything He did. It wasn't an afterthought. It wasn't something He squeezed in when He had time. It was His first response, His highest priority, His direct connection to the Father. But here's something we often miss. Jesus didn't just exercise faith for Himself. He exercised faith for others constantly. Think about this. If anyone could have been self-sufficient, it was Jesus. He was fully God, walking in divine authority, calming storms, healing the sick, casting out demons, raising the dead. Yet over and over again, He stood in the gap through faith for those who couldn't stand for themselves. He exercised faith for His disciples. He exercised faith for the lost. And this is where it gets really personal. He exercised faith for you. Let that sink in. Before you ever exercised faith for yourself, Jesus had already exercised for you. Look at this moment right before His crucifixion, His final hours before suffering. And what was He doing? He was exercising faith for His disciples and for future believers, including you and me. He trusted the Father that you would be strengthened, that you would be protected, that you would be united with other believers, and that you would know the depths of God's love. Jesus' greatest desire through faith was that you would be with Him, that nothing would separate you from Him. But here's the part that changes everything. If Jesus exercised faith for us with that kind of intensity, what does that mean for how we should walk in faith? It means we're called to exercise faith for others with the same passion that Jesus exercised for us. Too often our faith is self-focused. God help me. God bless me. God open doors for me. And yes, there is absolutely a place for personal faith. But if Jesus, our ultimate example, spent so much time standing in the gap through faith for others, shouldn't we? Let me ask you, when was the last time you exercised faith for someone with the same passion you exercise faith for yourself? Because here's the truth. Some people in your life will never exercise faith for themselves. Some don't know how. Some are too broken to even try. And that's where you come in. Just like Jesus stood in the gap for us through faith, we are called to stand in the gap for others through faith. That friend who is struggling, exercise faith for them. That family member who has drifted from God, exercise faith for them. That co-worker who seems lost and broken, exercise faith for them. That leader who is carrying a heavy burden, exercise faith for them. Faith isn't just about you. It's about lifting up the people around you through trust in God. And let me tell you something. Your faith is making a bigger impact than you realize. That moment you exercised faith for a struggling friend, it strengthened them more than you know. That time you trusted God for someone's salvation, it might be the reason their heart begins to soften toward God. That prayer of faith you lifted up for your church, it could be them chains start breaking in people's lives. We don't always see the results of our faith immediately, but that doesn't mean they aren't moving heaven and earth. Jesus didn't just exercise faith for himself. He stood in the gap for others through faith. And now he invites us to do the same. So let's do something right now. Take a moment. Think of one person in your life who needs someone to exercise faith for them. Someone who is struggling. Someone who needs a breakthrough. Now don't just think about them. Right where you are, exercise faith for them. Lift them up. Trust God to move in their life. Because the same way Jesus exercised faith for you, you are now called to exercise faith for others. And if you're thinking, but I don't always know how to exercise faith for them, don't worry. The Holy Spirit helps us in our weakness. Even when we don't know exactly what to trust God for, the Spirit himself intercedes for us. Even when you don't have the words, God does. Your faith matters more than you realize, because faith is not just belief. It's warfare. It's standing in the gap for someone who doesn't even realize they need it. And let me tell you, someone somewhere is walking in victory today because somebody exercised faith for them. Maybe it was a praying grandmother trusting God for her wayward grandson. Maybe it was a mother on her knees, exercising faith for her child. Maybe it was a friend who refused to stop believing even when everything looked hopeless. Jesus exercised faith for you before you even knew you needed it. Now it's your turn. Who are you willing to exercise faith for today? Because the most Christ-like thing you can do, more than preaching, more than singing, more than anything else, is simply this: exercise faith like Jesus. When life is good, faith feels natural. When things are falling apart, faith feels impossible. Yet, the most important moments in Jesus' life, his greatest battles, his deepest pains, his darkest hours, were all marked by unwavering faith. Hanging on the cross in unbearable agony, Jesus uttered some of his final words. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Think about that. Jesus, beaten, humiliated, abandoned, still exercised faith. And not just any faith. A faith of total trust. A faith of complete surrender. A faith that said, even now, in this pain, in this moment where I put everything in your hands. What do you do when life breaks you? When the diagnosis is worse than you expected? when the relationship falls apart, when your plans collapse and you're left standing in the wreckage? Do you exercise faith, or do you pull away from God? Because here's the truth. Your crisis will either push you into God's arms through faith or away from them. Jesus showed us which choice to make. In Gethsemane, the night before his crucifixion, he exercised faith so intensely that he sweat drops of blood. He was in anguish knowing what was coming. He didn't ignore the pain. He didn't pretend to be strong. He fell to his knees and trusted, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Jesus didn't just exercise faith through the crisis. He exercised faith before the crisis. Let that sink in. Most of us wait until the storm hits before we start exercising faith. But Jesus exercised faith before the storm came, before the arrest, before the betrayal, before the nails. He was already anchored. How many of us only exercise faith when we're desperate, when the pain is unbearable, when the anxiety is overwhelming, when we have no other options? But what if we exercised faith before the storm came? Jesus knew what was coming, and he still chose to trust, because faith doesn't just get you through the crisis. It prepares you for it. Think about this. When the storm hits, do you want to be scrambling to build a foundation, or do you want to already be standing on one? Jesus exercised faith before the storm, in the storm, and through the storm. And his final words on the cross tell us everything we need to know about how to handle suffering. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When life is breaking you, when the weight is too much, when you feel like you can't go another step, what if your first response was to put it in the Father's hands? Not in the hands of your own understanding, not in the hands of your emotions, not in the hands of the world's opinions, but in the hands of the only one who can carry it. Jesus didn't just teach us how to exercise faith when things are good. He showed us how to exercise faith when things are unbearable. And here's the thing. Jesus' suffering had a purpose. At the moment the cross looked like defeat, it looked like loss, it looked like the end. But 3 days later, everything changed. Your suffering is not the end of your story. That storm, that loss, that battle, it's not final. And the same way Jesus' suffering led to resurrection, God is working through your pain in ways you cannot see yet. But here's the key. You have to exercise faith through it. So let me ask you, are you going through a storm right now? Are you carrying something too heavy for you? Are you struggling to exercise faith because the pain is so deep? You are not alone. Jesus has been where you are, and his example shows us exactly what to do. Exercise faith anyway. Even if you don't have the words. Even if all you can do is whisper, "God, I trust you." Even if your faith is just tears running down your face. Exercise faith anyway, because there is no storm too big for God to handle. And maybe today your faith needs to be the same one Jesus exercised in his darkest moment. "Father, into your hands I commit this pain. I commit my future." Because if the hands of the Father were strong enough to bring Jesus through death itself, then they are strong enough to carry you through this storm. So don't let the crisis silence your faith. Let it drive you deeper into it. If the last lesson showed us anything, it's that faith isn't just about getting through life's hardest moments. It's about preparing for them before they even come. Jesus showed us this by his example. But he didn't stop there. He went a step further. He actually taught us how to increase our faith. Think about it. The disciples could have asked him anything. Lord, teach us how to perform miracles. Lord, teach us how to preach like you. Lord, teach us how to cast out demons. But they didn't. Instead, they asked one thing. Lord, increase our faith. Why? Because they saw something in Jesus' life of faith that was different. Something powerful. Something they knew they needed. And Jesus answered them with a model so clear that even people who don't know the Bible can feel its power. But here's the problem. Most people want bigger faith without ever realizing how Jesus built it. It wasn't meant to be a vague idea to repeat without thinking. It was meant to be a divine structure that unlocks the power of real faith. And when we break it down, we realize Jesus gave us a step-by-step guide to exercising faith in a way that actually connects us with God. First, faith starts with recognizing who God is. Jesus constantly pointed people to the greatness of the Father. Notice he didn't start with problems. He started with relationship. When you exercise faith, do you approach God like a child coming to a loving father or like a servant trying to please a harsh master? Next, faith aligns with God's will. Jesus trusted, your kingdom come, your will be done. This is surrender. Before we ever ask for anything, Jesus tells us to align ourselves with what God is already doing. How many of us exercise faith backwards, starting with our list of things we want before even asking God what he wants? But real faith isn't about convincing God to do what we want. It's about aligning ourselves with what he is already doing. Then faith depends on God daily. Jesus taught us to trust for daily bread, not weekly, not monthly. Not enough to be comfortable for the next 10 years. Daily. Because faith isn't just about getting things from God. It's about depending on him every single day. Too many people only exercise faith when there's a crisis. But Jesus is saying, exercise faith for your needs every day. Because when you stop trusting daily, you stop depending daily. Faith also involves forgiveness. Jesus was clear, exercise faith for forgiveness, but only if you are willing to forgive others. How many of us hold on to grudges, bitterness, and resentment while asking God to move in our lives? Faith is blocked by unforgiveness. If you're wondering why your faith feels small, ask yourself, who do I still need to forgive? Faith acknowledges the battle. Jesus taught us to pray, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. He knew we are constantly at war with temptation, sin, and the enemy. Faith isn't just about asking. It's about protecting. When was the last time you exercised faith against temptation before it even came? Or do you only exercise faith after you've already fallen into it? Jesus tells us to exercise faith before the battle. And finally, faith ends the same way it starts, with worship. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Because faith is not just about problems. It's about perspective. When we focus on God's kingdom, his power, and his glory, our fears shrink, our doubts fade, our problems lose their grip. When we remember God is in control, everything changes. This model of faith isn't just a formula. It's a strategy, a battle plan, a way to connect with God in the deepest way possible. So the question is, are you just wishing for bigger faith, Or are you actually exercising it the way Jesus showed us? Because Jesus didn't just teach this model, he lived it. And if we want to walk in the kind of faith that moves mountains, it's time we do the same. If the last thing Jesus showed us about faith was a battle plan, then what he exercised in the hours before the cross was the battle itself. It was the moment where Jesus, knowing he was about to go to the cross, exercised faith not for himself, but for us. And what did he trust the Father for? Not for us to be rich, not for us to be successful, not even for us to be safe. Jesus exercised faith for unity. He trusted that all who would believe would be one, just as he and the Father are one. Of all the things he could have asked the Father, he asked for oneness. Why? Because Jesus knew that one of the greatest weapons the enemy would use against his people was division. And isn't that exactly what we see today? Churches split over minor disagreements. Families broken apart by pride, unforgiveness, and politics. Believers arguing with each other instead of exercising faith together. The devil doesn't need to destroy the church if he can divide it. Jesus knew that. That's why his final act of faith before the cross wasn't just about personal strength. It was about corporate unity. But here's the question. Why does unity even matter? Why would Jesus prioritize oneness over everything else through faith? Because when believers are divided, the world cannot see Christ in us. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. That's a powerful statement. Jesus is saying the way the world sees God is through how we love each other through faith. Which means every time Christians fight, every time believers turn on each other, every time we let pride, offense, or ego create division, we are blocking the world from seeing Jesus. That's why unity is not just a nice idea. It's spiritual warfare. And the enemy hates it. Look at what happened in the early church when they were united, walking in one accord, filled with faith. Miracles broke out. Thousands came to Christ. The church exploded in power. But as soon as division crept in, false teachers arose, arguments broke out, churches began to split. Satan knows that a divided church is a weak church. Let's be real. We have fallen right into that trap. Think about the petty arguments that have torn believers apart. You're not saved if you don't worship like me. Your theology is wrong because you don't agree with my opinion. I can't walk in faith with you because we vote differently. This is not the church Jesus exercised faith for. This is not the unity he trusted the Father for. And yet we justify it. We act like it's righteous to tear each other down over preferences. But unity does not mean uniformity. It doesn't mean we all have to agree on every issue. It means that despite our differences, we refuse to let anything separate us from the love of Christ and from each other through faith. Because the moment we stop seeing each other as family, we have already lost the battle. This is why Jesus' faith still echoes today. Because unity is not just an option. It's a command. Jesus exercised faith for it. Now, are we willing to fight for it through faith? Let me be clear. Unity isn't passive. It's not just about avoiding conflict. It's about actively pursuing peace through faith. It means forgiving even when you're right. It means loving even when you don't agree. It means exercising faith for people you struggle with instead of gossiping about them. And when we do that, we don't just experience personal breakthrough. we see spiritual revival. Because when the church finally unites, when believers finally stop fighting each other and start exercising faith together, when we let go of our pride, our grudges, our selfishness through faith, something miraculous happens. The world sees Jesus. And that is what he exercised faith for. So now the real question is, will we answer that faith with our lives? If there's one thing Jesus showed us time and time again, it's that miracles don't just happen. They are birthed in faith. Before every supernatural move, every act of healing, every display of divine power, Jesus exercised faith. And yet in today's world, many believers want to see God's power, but they neglect the very thing that unlocks it. Look at the pattern in Jesus' life. Before he multiplied the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he took them, looked up to heaven, and exercised faith through thanksgiving. Before raising Lazarus from the dead, he exercised faith out loud so that people would believe. Before healing people, before casting out demons, before calming the storm, Jesus exercised faith. It was never just a performance. It was partnership with the Father through faith. And here's where most people miss it. Faith wasn't just an afterthought for Jesus. It wasn't just positive thinking. It was the very source of his authority. And that's the part we need to understand. We live in a generation that wants miracles, but avoids real faith. We want breakthrough, but we won't wake up early to seek God in faith. We want revival, but we won't take time to fast and exercise faith. We want power, but we won't even prioritize 5 minutes of trusting God a day. And that's why we don't see what Jesus saw. The early church understood this. Before Pentecost, they exercised faith together. Before Peter and John healed the lame man, they were going to the temple to exercise faith. Before Paul and Silas were set free from prison, they exercised faith and worshiped. The pattern is right in front of us, but we've ignored it. Jesus wasn't just performing miracles. He was showing us how to live in the supernatural. The key was never just talent, charisma, or good preaching. The key was faith. And here's where it gets even more real. The reason why so many believers today struggle to see God move in their lives isn't because God has changed. It's because we have. We have filled our lives with distractions. We spend more time on our phones than exercising faith in God's presence. We prioritize entertainment over trusting God. And then we wonder why our faith feels weak. We wonder why we don't see the miracles we read about. We wonder why we struggle with fear, doubt, anxiety, and spiritual dryness. The answer isn't a mystery. The answer is faith. And I don't mean quick, shallow, half-hearted belief before a meal. I mean real faith. The kind that shakes heaven and destroys strongholds. The kind that moves mountains and changes lives. The kind that keeps you on your knees until God moves. Because that's what Jesus did. He didn't just exercise faith when it was convenient. He exercised faith before everything, before choosing his disciples all night in faith, before facing the cross sweating drops of blood in Gethsemane, before stepping into his ministry 40 days fasting in the wilderness. If the Son of God needed to exercise faith, how much more do we? So let's ask the real question. Are you living like Jesus lived? Or are you trying to see miracles without living a life of faith? Are you relying on your own strength? Or are you connected to the power source through faith? Because here's the truth. Miracles don't come from wishful thinking. Breakthrough doesn't happen by accident. Revival is not a random event. It comes when believers return to faith, When we stop making excuses and start making time for God. When we stop treating faith like a last resort and start making it our first priority. Because if Jesus himself, God in the flesh, had to exercise faith before every miracle, how can we expect to walk in power without doing the same? If there's one thing we've learned from Jesus' life of faith so far, it's this. Faith wasn't just something he had. It was who he was. He didn't just trust when it was convenient. He didn't just trust when things were easy. He lived in faith. And if the Son of God needed that deep, constant trust in the Father, how much more do we? But here's the question we all need to ask ourselves. Are we exercising faith out of routine or out of relationship? Because if faith is nothing more than a checklist, a quick God, help me before bed, or something we only do when life gets hard, then we are missing everything Jesus was trying to show us. Faith was never meant to be a religious duty. It was meant to be a living, breathing relationship with the living God. And yet, look at how many of us treat it. We exercise faith when we need something. We exercise faith when we're in trouble. We exercise faith when we feel spiritual. But Jesus exercised faith because he needed the Father every second of every day. Do we? Or do we think we can handle life on our own? That's the difference. That's why Jesus was never shaken, never lost, never disconnected from his purpose. He didn't just exercise faith when he felt like it. He lived in faith. That's what we've missed. We want to experience God's power, his presence, his miracles, but we refuse to prioritize the one thing that brings them. Think about this. Jesus, the Son of God, the one who had all authority, all wisdom, all power, still felt the need to exercise faith constantly. He exercised faith before making decisions. He exercised faith before performing miracles. He exercised faith when he was joyful, when he was hurting, when he was exhausted. So if Jesus needed that kind of faith life, why don't we? Maybe that's why so many believers today feel spiritually empty. They're chasing after blessings instead of chasing after the one who gives them. They're asking for God's help but never spending time exercising faith in his presence. They're running on spiritual fumes because they've been neglecting the very source of life. Faith is not optional. It is not a last resort. Faith is survival. Without faith, we are powerless. Without faith, we are directionless. Without faith, we are weak, distracted and vulnerable to every attack of the enemy. And yet, so many of us try to live the Christian life without a real life of faith. So, let's make this personal. How's your faith life? Not just the moments you trust God before eating. Not just the times you ask God to fix something. Are you truly seeking him every single day through faith? Because here's the truth. Your relationship with God is only as strong as your faith life. If you want to know his voice, you need to exercise faith with him. If you want to walk in his power, you need to exercise faith with him. If you want to see breakthroughs, grow spiritually, and live the life he's called you to, you need to exercise faith with him. There are no shortcuts, and there is no substitute. And we need to stop waiting for the right moment to start. Jesus didn't wait until he had free time to exercise faith. He didn't wait until he wasn't tired. He didn't wait until he had no distractions. He made faith his priority. So here's the challenge. What's one change you're going to make in your faith life today? Are you going to start exercising faith before decisions instead of after them? Are you going to up earlier to seek God in faith? Are you going to stop rushing through trust and start actually listening to God? Because if we don't make changes, nothing will change. This isn't about adding another religious rule. This is about drawing closer to the Father. And if Jesus, the one who walked in absolute power, wisdom, and authority, needed faith every single day, then we do too. So, no more excuses. No more waiting. No more letting distractions steal the most important part of our day. It's time to exercise faith like Jesus did. And when we do, our lives will never be the same. If there's one question that should shake us awake, it's this: are we ready to live the kind of faith Jesus lived? Because we've spent this entire video walking through how Jesus exercised faith, why he exercised faith, and what it means for us. But now it's time for more than just knowledge. It's time to exercise faith like never before. Maybe you've been struggling with faith. Maybe you feel like your trust isn't strong enough. Maybe you don't even know where to start. But here's the good news. You don't have to figure this out alone. The Holy Spirit helps us in our weakness. Jesus is interceding for us right now. And the Father is waiting for you to come closer. So right now, let's exercise faith together. Let's ask God to transform our faith lives. Let's surrender the distractions, the excuses, the doubts, and step into a deeper trust with Him. Wherever you are, bow your head, open your heart, and let's exercise faith. Father, we come before you with open hearts. We don't want to exercise faith out of routine, out of habit, or out of obligation. We want to know you, to trust you, to experience your presence like never before. Teach us to exercise faith, Lord. Teach us to trust like Jesus did, with radical surrender, with daily dependence, with unwavering confidence. Teach us to seek you in the quiet places, in the secret moments, in the stillness of the morning. Teach us to exercise faith before we make decisions, before we take action, before we try to handle things on our own. God, forgive us for every time we've treated faith like a last resort instead of our first response. Forgive us for every time we've rushed through it, distracted, unfocused, giving you only the leftovers of our time and attention. Lord, we ask for a fresh hunger for faith, a hunger that draws us into your presence daily, a hunger that makes us wake up seeking you first, a hunger that refuses to live without hearing your voice. And Lord, help us not just exercise faith for ourselves, but to exercise faith for others, for our families, for our friends, for those who are lost, broken, hurting, and far from you. Make us people who stand in the gap through faith. Make us warriors in trust. Make us believers who fight for others in the spiritual realm. And Father, we ask for one more thing. We ask for power in our faith, not empty belief, but faith that shakes the heavens, faith that moves mountains, faith that brings healing, restoration, breakthrough, and transformation. Your word says the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. Lord, make our faith powerful and effective. Make our faith aligned with your will. Make our faith unstoppable. We thank you in advance for what you're about to do, for the breakthroughs coming, for the miracles waiting, for the revival that starts in our hearts. We seal this moment of faith in the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Amen. If this moment of faith spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to grow in their faith life. And if you want to go even deeper, check out the ebooks in the description. We've put together powerful Bible study tools to help you strengthen your walk with God and understand His Word like never before. And before you go, drop a comment below. What's one thing you're committing to change in your faith life starting today? Stay blessed and never stop exercising faith.